Okay, in this video, I'd like to spend a few minutes talking about a critical concept that we get from Thomas Hobbes, who you've been reading. You've been reading selections from the Leviathan from him. And I want to talk about a critical concept for Hobbes, and that concept is the state of nature. This is perhaps the most important and profound concept that Hobbes gave to the social sciences broadly. And it's sort of out of a question that he asks with this concept of the state of nature that for centuries social scientists have been debating and trying to grapple with. And so we're going to talk about what the state of nature is, but I first want to pose the critical problem that it is that Hobbes is trying to get us to understand. Hobbes really asks the question, how is it even possible for societies to ever form in the first place? What makes it conceivable that we would get from what Hobbes sees as a bunch of selfish, egoistic individuals into the formation of a society itself? And it's with the concept of the state of nature that he really develops the ideas that answer for him that question. And this is an important question because what we'll see is that Durkheim has an answer to this question as well, but it's one that is very different from Hobbes's approach. So we need to first then understand what it is that the state of nature actually is for Hobbes. And you can see in your textbook on pages 31 to 32 where Hobbes really lays out his understanding of the state of nature. The state of nature is a world without civilization, without societies, without governments, without anything that we modern people take for granted as part of our daily world. So it's a world in which there are a bunch of individuals who have their own individual goals and self-interest, and they're all trying to basically just survive in this state of nature. And what this leads to for Hobbes is what he calls a war. He describes it as war of man against man. What he means, of course, is using the gendered language, is a war of all against all. Every person is out for themselves, and every person is then fighting one another to try to get what they need. And he doesn't actually mean that there's a sort of constant perpetual fighting going on. And so at the very bottom of the first paragraph on page 32, you can see that what he's really saying is that all that matters is there's the constant possibility of an outbreak of fighting between people. There's always the possibility that another person could attack you, right? So even if you yourself are a peaceful person, the fact that it's possible for another person to always be able to attack you, in some senses then to get away with it because there is no society, then this leads you to sort of constantly seek your own self-interest, preserve yourself, and to be ready to strike back if need be. So this is the state of nature as Hobbes sees it, a war of all against all. And you should really reflect back on those pages 31 to 32 to understand exactly what Hobbes is trying to say. So what's important about the state of nature is that when we're locked in this war of all against all, the emergence of society is impossible, Hobbes wants to argue. He wants to say that so long as individuals are locked in this competition, locked in this war inside of the state of nature, the emergence of society is impossible. Why would this be the case? We can really sort of see why this is the case if we take a look at a particular passage that happens in your text on page 32. Is probably the most famous passage out of the Leviathan that we're talking about. And here we can see why it becomes the case that the state of nature prevents the emergence of society. So it's important to really mull over this passage, so I'm going to read it in full. In such a condition, which Hobbes means in the midst of the state of nature, in this war of all against all, in such a condition there is no place for industry, because the fruit thereof is uncertain, and consequently no culture of the earth, no navigation, nor use of commodities that may be imported by sea, no commodious building, no instruments of moving and removing such things as require much force, no knowledge of the face of the earth, no account of time, no arts, no letters, no society, and which is worst of all, continual fear and danger of violent death. and the life of man solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. And that last quote is really one of the things Hobbes is most famous for. So in the state of nature, there is no place, just look at that first line, there is no place for industry. What does he mean? There's no place for creating things, for creating the things that we need, and then trading those things. That is no use of the commodities that may be imported by sea, right? There's no place to basically create things, trade with others, and sort of develop what ultimately we'll see Smith saying is the backbone of wealth, right? Because the fruit thereof is uncertain. So imagine if you have a tomato garden, right? In the state of nature, as soon as your tomatoes get ripe, right, a person will see that in your backyard, and in the middle of the night will go in and will steal all of your tomatoes from you, and thereby have a lot of tomatoes for themselves to eat, and you will have nothing, right? And there will be no mechanism to stop them from doing that, because there is no state, there are no laws, there is nothing to prevent someone from doing that. And so what it means is that we end up locked in this place where we don't produce things, we don't make the things that we could make our lives better, because it's too easy for someone else to come along and simply take them from us, or to see us working in the garden and come by and simply kill us and take everything that we have. That would be an easy way for an individual to survive, an individual in the state of nature in need to survive, and there would be nothing to stop them. And so because of this, Hobbes wants to see that in the state of nature, life is very harsh, and we're sort of locked in this war of all against all that prevents anything better from happening, right? And in that sense, he's saying this is what prevents society from developing. So that's what Hobbes sees as the state of nature. That's why the state of nature is such a hard thing to get out of, and that's why the emergence of societies in the context of this war of all against all becomes particularly difficult. So the question at hand that I'm going to leave you with is, how does Hobbes then argue that we can get beyond the state of nature? We're all living in society, and even Hobbes was living in society. He's not that old, right? So how is it the case that we can get from the state of nature into society? And that's going to form our discussion on the discussion board. So you need to go and make your responses to that, and then we will see what you can pull out of Hobbes's text. And so go back into the text and find where exactly Hobbes answers this question and how he makes his argument. And we will see what you come up with. Take care.